Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, making us late, is my co-host Tom. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
Hello, friends. I life happens. We are indeed on Tom time tonight, so just tuck in. This is what life is.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. This is Tom time, so I'm excited about that. And we're this is a hotel show. In case it's not incredibly obvious that I'm not in my normal place. I'm very busy. It's been like a super long day for me. I have another very long one tomorrow, so we're going to keep a relatively short show today. But of course, we do have all the fun stuff for you. We're going to talk about who has the best lore in the Mortal Realms later. But first up, the news.
I do. Newsflash: I have the best lore out there.
Sure, as is what everybody would
It's
say.
me.
Yes.
Yes, I'm the problem. It's me. Hey, so uh rumor engine like Christmas.
Yeah, there's no standard rumor
surprise?
engines, but yes, it's Christmas rumor engine,
Right.
and I only grabbed one of them. They've done 6 of them so far.
Course.
The first 5 were complete garbo, so it doesn't matter. Like, one of them is very obviously 40k. 2 or 3 of them are just completely nothing, and it's impossible to see what they actually are. But this one, Tom, today, day 6, we were given a gift, a glorious gift. Okay. Now, Tom, do you know why we were given such a glorious gift today, Tom?
Because it's a ratty.
It's a yes, because it's Nurgle, but it's also a rat hand, and it's in the exact same position as a previous Skaven Plague Priest. All hail the prediction of brand new Skaven relaunch coming with 4th edition next year. I fully believe that's what we're looking at here. Yes, you can see the Nurgle 3 circles on the cover.
Will that into existence? Is that the plan here?
Yeah, just keep wishing it. I mean, this is clearly proof that what we've been saying is true the whole time. I agree. This is rock solid proof. I mean, at this point, you can just take it to the bank. One rumor engine. Come on.
We've been on this for a year now.
Yeah.
So if we do call it, that will be like an 18-month, almost 2-year lead on calling that. I just want to point that out.
Sure. Hey, look, I'm believing it. So there you go.
Indeed. So exciting. We have some other less exciting news. Let's talk about the old world magic phase.
Yeah.
Womp, womp, womp.
I mean, it's fine. It's there's some stuff that's exactly what you would expect. You still have level 1, 2, 3, 4 wizards. They have bonuses equal to their level, like they always have, and you pay points to level them up, and so on and so forth. So, a lot of it is exactly what you think. Double 1s is a miscast, then you roll in the miscast table. Double 6s is overwhelming power, and you auto cast it, and all of that kind of thing. I do think that what's interesting about the way they've chosen to do magic, I mean, this is actually a big deviation, and so I'll give them credit here where credit's due for being willing to explore new stuff, is they've brought magic out of a singular phase and brought it into every phase. So it like they're basically there's 6 different types of spells, enchantments and hexes and missiles and so on.
Yep.
And then each one of those is tied to a particular phase, right? So your enchantments and hexes happen in the hero phase and so on, and then there's movement phase and shooting and combat. So it's an interesting concept. I'm not against it. It looked like for the most part it was basically what you would expect the magic phase to look like in there. We didn't really see enough of the spells. They gave a little bit of the spells, like they gave 3 different sort of sample spells, and they all seemed fine. But I mean, the key with magic lores historically was that all that you needed was sort of one busted thing, and then that was what everybody sort of went to, right? If you had the option to go to it. It's interesting. I like the change.
What I would say is this: I do appreciate how they it solves some of the problems, right? Like the hero phase teleporting, or the teleport in the hero phase, but then having to put restrictions on the movement phase and yada yada yada, right? Like
Sure.
if you just have a certain type of spell that transports you and it's always in the movement phase, then it solves the movement problem.
Yeah. Bring your mic closer to yourself. Someone said you're still a little quiet.
Yep. That's what I was actually working on adjusting settings when I started talking, and so that I got distracted. Yeah, so that's I don't know is the answer. I think that it could be positive is what I would say.
Yeah. I mean, with Magic, the devil is always in the details. Okay, that's the reality of the history of Warhammer.
Right. Right.
And so, I'll be interested to see as things go on. I commend the big change here. I don't the whole leveled wizards and bonuses to cast. It becomes very, very, very swingy when you're dealing with +1 to +4 on a 2d6 bell curve. That's a huge difference. The difference between +1 and +4 is mathematically insane. It goes from like a 10% increase to or like a 10% bonus chance to cast swings to sort of a 95% chance to be successful, right? So it's or bigger, 98.5. So like it's pretty wild what exactly that means, and then obviously having your enemy have the same thing. So it kind of led to a previous arms race. Like one of the nice parts about sapping the level bonus out of the thing when we went to AOS was it stopped the arms race of like, oh, I have to have my level 4 wizard or whatever. The only other thing that caught my eye was your unbind range is 18 inches, which is pretty close. And if you're a level 1 or 2, close. And then 24 inches if you're a level 3 or 4. So they actually have different unbind ranges, which was interesting because that means like a master wizard can cast on a baby wizard without being the chance to be unbound, but it's not true in reverse. So
I don't hate it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. That's like that's another one of those things that does feel like it will pretty quickly create an arms race where like if you don't have a level 3 wizard, you are just sunk, right? Because somebody will be able to get up and sort of 19-inch you, right? Where they can free cast on you and yet shut you down. So I hate Magic in Warhammer. I've always hated Magic in Warhammer.
I know you do.
I think it's like the stupidest part of Warhammer. Like I like Magic and stuff. Don't get me wrong. In D&D, I love
fun
Magic.
Fun facts, everybody. I proposed a Magic show tonight, and Vince was like, "Nah, dog, we're not doing that."
Yeah, one, it's too complicated for a hotel show. Two, I was like, I don't want to talk about something I hate for an hour and a half. I'm not gonna do it. It was Magic stupid. Yeah. So at any rate, I'll be interested to see where it keeps going. That's what it comes down to. So the old world continues to be interesting, tentatively interesting. There you go.
Sure. So then let's talk about the miniature of the year. Voting is up.
Yep.
You know how hard it is to vote for a model when it's just a list of names?
I know.
Like there's no pictures. Like it's so counterintuitive. Like I went to vote and I was like, something's missing here. Maybe pictures of all the things we're supposed to be voting for.
It just shocks me. They've never done it. It's always just been a big list of names. Like I understand they're including everything for the year. Like everything. And really you look at the list and you're like, my God, they make a lot of models, right? That's the first thing you think is like, Jesus, that's a lot of models. You don't even realize how many are actually being made every year, how many new designs until you look at them all gathered in a list and you realize just how incredible the design team, the studio team is at just churning out quality stuff. But ultimately, the fact that they can't make a page where they just pull in the pictures and have you select based on that is so wild to me. Like they can't make a visual photo gallery. It's crazy. It's just crazy.
As a model company.
They have all the photos. It's not like they're hauling the models out and taking photos of them, Tom.
Sure. Okay. Right.
These
exist. This is a web design issue. This is a web flow issue. This is not a.
I think it's a time issue. I don't think they give people enough time to work on it. That's the problem because it would take slightly more time, just to like locate all the photo files and everything like that. Right? They are going to be dispersed.
There's a format page that does exactly that. Called their web store.
I understand. I know.
And they could just, you could click the button instead of adding it to cart.
Yeah.
Vote for this model.
Yeah, so I mean, go vote, and we can all be excited about whatever 40K model wins this year. I assume it'll be Angron.
So it's always a 40K model.
Yeah,
But Vince, what have you voted?
not yet, no.
Do you know what you're gonna vote for?
I looked over the list. I'm not sure yet. Like, obviously, I'm going to vote for an AOS model. It's probably down to there's a few that I liked, but I think mine would all be off picks that don't matter. I'm just wasting my vote because the things I liked, I don't think are the
Oh,
ones that everybody else loved, is what it comes down to. But
that's fair.
not that I don't want to vote for Big Pig, because I do want to vote for Big Pig. I mean, Big Pig is sort of the easy slam dunk answer. I think it's amazing, and I really wanted it. And I think the model's good. I'm just not sure it's actually my favorite model of the year, like legitimately. It kind of doesn't have a great golden angle for viewing. It's a beautiful model. It's wonderful. I love it. Please don't get me wrong. I'm just not sure it's actually my true favorite of the year. But it'd be the easy fallback pick, like Big Pig forever. What about you?
I was torn between Talia and Ionis, and I think I settled on Ionis. I think he's the right answer.
I get that.
Just with the dragon, like the movement and just everything, like just
Sure.
everything about it is evocative and interesting and engaging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. Honestly, I think my pick might be the Cities Free Guild Marshal on horse. You know what I'm talking about?
He's really good. Yeah, I do very
I
much.
really like, he's got a wonderful pose. The way the horse is sitting there, the way the wind is moving through the model, like it feels so alive and in the world. Like I mean, I understand it's not the most flashy, exciting one. Like Talia is clearly incredible and all of that. Ionis is incredible.
Yep.
Belthanos is incredible. Like these are all feats of miniature sculpting greatness, right? But I don't know, man. It's like you ever had a really good piece of toast. You just get like a really good piece
Yeah.
of toast, and you get
Yep.
like some
Just
nice
just the right
fresh
amount of
butter.
crisp.
Yeah, it's just perfect,
Nice.
right? And you eat
The
it, and you're
right
like,
heat.
yeah,
Yep.
you eat it, and you're like, man, this is really good, right? This is just, it's
Like or a
simple.
cornbread muffin. The perfect
Absolutely,
cornbread
the
muffin.
perfect cornbread muffin. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's nothing complicated about it, right? It's just delicious. And that's kind of that model for me. Like I love its simplicity. I love its beauty. I love how much it feels like it's sitting in the actual world it's supposed to live in. So, like that's what I mean when I say I was looking at that one and I was like, if I vote for this, I'm just throwing my vote away. But I might want to, just as a protest vote, because it's such a cool model and I liked it.
No, it is. It is. It is a beautiful model.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah. So there you go. All right. Cool. I think that's all our news, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. What you got for pick of the week, Tom? What do you want to share with everybody?
I'm gonna be a little bit selfish this week. I put up a thread on Twitter, um, evoking folks to put up your favorite kind of hobby essential, whether it be like a tool or a brush or lights that you think would be a wonderful Christmas gift.
Yep.
And I'm going to invite everybody to go and to put their favorite thing, right, um, out there. Like I've already seen uh, Old Town Throwdowns, Tom's Wow Stick, and like he's not wrong. The
Yeah.
Wow
Yeah.
Stick
Sure.
is a
The
delightful
little pen
gift.
drill.
Like it's
Yeah.
a wonderful tool.
Mm-hmm.
Little pen drill, exactly. And I love mine. Like
I
truly,
use it all the
truly
time,
love mine.
like all the time.
Yeah.
It is a constantly
Yep.
used tool.
And I've been being like asked to make a list for Christmas for myself, and
Sure.
I was like, I have no idea how to do this, and so it dawned on me that like, hey, maybe I'll just solicit this from the community, and other people are probably in the similar position that I am, right? Like they
Yeah.
might be looking for gifts and recommendations, and we don't know what we don't know, right?
Sure.
And so it's kind of an invitation for people to share, their favorite stuff for the hobby.
I love that. Yeah. I reposted you, re-xed you, whatever we're calling it now. That question. So whatever stupid thing that site decides to change to today. That
Yep,
cursed
yep.
site. But it's still great for. I love how we've just like carved out this little survivor community amongst Warhammer people on there, even though it's such a trash site. At any rate, I saw a lot of people talking about lights, and that made total
Yeah.
sense to me. Like a good painting light. There were so many people that were asking for good painting lights, and I realized, man, there really is like just a gap for people who of like what's the actual light to buy, like what's good, what's not trash. And I'm pretty hopeful because I have a new light right now that I got that I know is not available yet, but will be available soon. And I'm going to tell you right now, Tom, it is by far my favorite light I have ever used.
Really?
It is incredible.
Really?
Yes, it is so good. It creates a perfect, beautiful, wonderful, full halo of just light all over your desk, and like it's.
I love everything I'm hearing.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's
really,
exciting.
really good. And I'm testing it out right now. But I mean, I won't say what it is because I don't know when I'm supposed to talk about it. But whenever I am supposed to talk about it, I'm going to talk about it a lot because I think, and I'll do a full review about lighting in general, because I think it's like legitimately a hobby light that would suit basically everyone. So, yeah, more to come on that. Yeah, good pick. Mine, since we're not doing our Flesh Eater Quartz review this week, I'm sorry, people who were hoping for that. But again, Hotel Show makes it
I am
impossible.
so sad. I want you all to know that. Like, I was pushing hard
You can
because
come back and join
man,
us again next
I've
week,
been
Tom, if you want. We can do 4 people.
that would no, we can't. First of all, that would be week 4 of me on the show. It'd be like
Yeah,
I
how
was here
weird that
every
would
week.
be.
It'd be insane. It would be insane. But you know, more importantly, like 4 is just too many, and that's fine. What I'll say is this: you all will have fun, and you're right, folks. The FEC book is delightful and amazing. It'll be great. But
Yeah,
we're gonna
I'm
do
very
that
much looking forward to it. I think we like short review. I think we finally got there. It feels good, but not crazy. Is my short answer.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So
I've built a bunch of different lists. That's what I'll say.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played a little practice game and had like legitimate fun playing it. So yeah. Anyways, but like I said, we'll do the full FEC show next week. Flesh Eater Quartz. But if you're thirsty for that Flesh Eater Quartz knowledge, then why not check out Stuart, the Iron Gutsman's review of it. It is linked down below in the description. Stuart is a paramount hero in our community and should be and did a really great review. So yeah, he should be heeded, for he shares wisdom. So check that out. Linked down in the description. All right. I'm obviously not going to be able to share any hobby time, but Tom, have you continued working? How goes the hobby?
Oof. Yeah, I started a model scheme that just didn't work. Like, I started painting my Claws of Karnak, and I was like set on a couple colors and went in to make it work, and it did not work.
It did
Like,
not
it
work.
just totally did not work. And
Nope.
and I got it from multiple people, and they were just like, "Nope, sorry, man." And so, and I refused to complement the colors with the colors that I'm supposed to complement them with.
Right.
And so, like, I wasn't going to do that, and so it meant that I had to go back to square one. So I'm probably going to have a very boring, normal looking corn army of red
we
and
can
brass.
spice it up,
And
man. If you want, I'm happy to brainstorm with you. We can spice it up. There's plenty of ideas. You don't have to go crazy.
it's probably going to be boring. It's probably going to be boring. So we'll see.
That's fine. You don't have to be boring. But Tom, let me share a similar story with you. You ready? Because this is proof that no matter where you are in the hobby, this is going to happen. Okay. So for me, I'm working on a competition piece, and I got it to like a pretty good place. Okay. Recorded a video out of it, happy with the video, stuff like that. And then, but as I looked at it, you know, it's on my desk. Like, I'm trying to really take time with this, right? So I just work on it a couple hours each day, couple hours each day. The whole belief that, like, it's not about, I'm not trying to grind it out. I'm trying to just keep working on it, right? So it's the little bit of sand. The donkey shook off the dirt, stomped on the dirt, and then rose itself up or whatever. You know what I'm saying, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And as I was working on it and looking at the other things, I kept thinking to myself, something's wrong. This doesn't work. Like, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I was like, something just isn't right here. Okay. And so I hit up a couple of other people and was like, please tell me what's wrong with this. I can't see it. Right? I've been working on this thing for hours a day for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that, right? And the problem is that, I mean, intermittently, like, I worked on other projects in there and painted other things in there, but it's always been on the desk. And I'm like, I just can't see it. And sure enough, they were like, well, this, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's it. Like immediately they saw what I couldn't, and I had to go back and like repaint over a whole section because the sort of the tones I had chosen weren't correct. Like I went too warm when it needed to be colder, and he was like, long story. I might actually make a video out of this because I think it might be an interesting journey of just like actually showing their chat of like this is the feedback I got and why they're right and why I was wrong and why and what that means. And that meant I just blanked parts of the model I had spent 30, 40 hours painting, right? And just literally took a base coat color and just was like, slap it over the top. That's all gone. Get rid of that work, right? And had to start over. And it's funny too because now where I am with it, I'm way happier. Like I did manage to figure out the new sort of recipes, new colors, the new composition, whatever you want to say, that got me to a better place. And I'm like, oh, thank God I redid that because that was trash before comparatively. So sometimes it's just you've got an idea in your head of how it's going to work, and when you're doing the model, it just doesn't. That's what happens.
Yep. I mean, that's exactly what happened with me. Is that like I went through a scheme, I had a picture for what this was going to look like, and like it was going to push me into complementary colors that I didn't want to go into, and so like I pulled the plug on it.
Yep.
So as I mentioned in the chat, it was a strong teal edging on turquoise, and I refused to go into purple and pink, and so at that point like I wanted to be in the reds, and I just wasn't able to square that circle, with a dark flesh tone, which obviously complicated it as well.
Sure, because you already have orange tones in that pretty heavily. Yeah.
Yep.
So
it happens.
It does, and that's fine. You know, that's what it is. Sometimes you just got to take the time to be like, okay, cool. I guess we restart over then, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. It's all right to have that on the journey. Somebody asked earlier in the chat, by the way, for like a magnifier headset. I know that was another thing that came up in your chat or in your series of tweets. And honestly, my answer is I just bought like a cheapy one off Amazon that has different lens magnifications you can use. That's it. It's really nothing special. It gets you there. Like you just want one that has at least a 3x magnification thingy. And then I actually wear mine with my glasses. So I have to put it like on my face to where its little clippy thing is here, and then the lens is in front, and then I'm holding the model like right here, right? So that's kind of how I have to work there.
Yep.
But yeah, that's it. Just some cheapy thing off Amazon. I think I might have it linked in my hobby supplies, but if not, I'll throw one down there after the show. All right, cool. Tom, shall we move to the formal segment of the show, the main topic?
Sure.
All right, let's do it. Here we go. Let me go ahead and minimize our beautiful recast we're at here. Who's got it? The best lore? That's the question. Who's got it? Yeah, baby, they got it. Well, it definitely ain't these people in the picture. I just happen to like this picture. This one's a bad mod. But before we get into the specifics, I think it's important that we talk about what our criteria are going to be here, Tom. Okay?
Okay.
So when I think best lore, here's how I think about it. You tell me if this aligns with your expectations. Okay?
Okay.
1, the overall story is cool, right? Like overall, it's a neat, cool, fun, interesting, compelling story. Like the broad sweep of the thing. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
2, there's interesting characters doing interesting things somewhere in the lore. All right?
And we're talking about AOS specifically.
AOS specifically. Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Like there's somebody who you can identify or identify with doing something. And by the way, people do not need to be humans for you to identify with them. I really hate this whole thing from like early AOS of like, where's the farmers? I don't identify with farmers. Okay. Like that means nothing. I've identified more with Superman comics than I have with like Batman comics. Okay. And I'm pretty sure one of them is quite human and one of them is not. Right. Mm-hmm. It's about what the character's going through emotionally. Doesn't matter how godlike they are. If they can like bench press a small moon, it's really irrelevant if they have emotional trials and tribulations that you can relate to. Right.
Yep.
Um, so the so that's another one. 3, okay, is do they have like enough interesting things going on in the details? So this could be in like novels or the stories or the expansion books or whatever, where they're like a functional part of the world doing interesting things. Okay. Like, are they as a faction involved, focused on, doesn't have to be a lot, but like to some degree where it's like clear that they're written into the broader sweep and lore of the world, and so hence are a compelling part of it, right? They're not just like, and also starring that shows up for 7 seconds to just be like a spoiler in some random story for no actual reason. You with me? Okay.
Yep. I already have factions like that in mind.
Sure, sure.
Go on.
Okay. That's really my criteria. Like, I'm not evaluating based on you have to read every novel or stuff like that. God knows I haven't. Okay. But I think it's really those 3 things. And it's not about necessarily does it get captured in the models, although that could be a part of it, I suppose, as well. Like, how much is the lore expressed through the individual models and whatnot. I think that's kind of a separate story. Really, to me, it's just those 3 things. Is the overall cool? Are there specific people doing specific things? And are they functionally active in some way in the world doing, as a faction, are they part of the tapestry in a meaningful way? Okay.
Can I say something? Can I open, like, I accept all those terms.
Okay.
Can I open with a very strong statement?
Yeah, sure.
We can basically throw out all of chaos.
We can basically throw out all of chaos. Well, I have some specifics. I've got some slides here. Okay.
Okay.
Where I've put sort of who I think is the best to just to let you bounce off it and foster some discussion.
Sure.
Then I also made a slide for the decent. Okay. So this is like what I would call average to above average. Like they're getting a 3 on their annual review. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Like the best slide, they're getting 4s and 5s. Doesn't mean they're all equal, but it all means like they're getting the 4s and 5s on the bell curve. Okay.
Well, I'm open and strong, just setting my terms. In general, chaos has done almost nothing meaningful moving into AOS.
Wow.
Like, it is the same. Like, sure, it's called Maggotkin now, but like there's nothing really interesting moving from fantasy into AOS in any of the factions.
Sure. Okay.
Like, none of them have meaningfully changed. But go ahead.
Cass
go
says,
on.
These are the Tom takes I watch for. Yeah, okay, good. It's a bold statement. Here's what I'll say. Well, let's I think.
I mean, am I wrong? Has anything
I disagree with you,
changed?
but my guess is in a way that isn't what you mean. Okay.
Okay.
Let me go to the next. Let's go to the slide. Here we go. We're just going to start here. The good. Okay, so these are 4s and 5s on their annual review. Doesn't mean they're all equal. Okay, I think we can talk about out of this what's the best. But I want to leave that to the end. Here we're just doing our candidates. Yeah. Okay. All right. So the exception to me in the good is in the chaos is first off Skaven. Now, and that's the reason I said this is because when you said chaos, my guess is you meant the 4 gods and maybe S2D.
I mean, like, it does not feel to me that chaos is meaningfully different than it was in the old world.
Yeah, I understand.
Like,
that.
maybe they have a pocket dimension.
Are you
like
counting
maybe they have
Skaven?
a pocket dimension? Yeah, I am. That's what I'm saying. Like, maybe Skaven have a pocket dimension now in the warp that they can like burrow into other realms, right? But their role, like, nothing is really meaningfully developed for them as a story, as a group, nothing within the clan structures. None of it is interesting. Like, it's all literally just an import from Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Like, think about where we were in the end times.
Sure.
And what has meaningfully changed from Skaven. Like, literally all the model. Like, and it's not just tied to models, but I mean, that's indicative as well. Like, it's all the same.
My answer to that is Skaven have been frequently so let's go through the criteria. Is the overall theme of the thing cool? Right? I didn't have in there as a criteria. It had to have meaningfully changed in some way since the old world. Like, if the themes and stories and activities that they were taking in the old world are still interesting and persuasive for them to do in the new world in Age of Sigmar, then I think that's fine. And I think Skaven or could be fine. I'm not going to automatically say it's okay, but I think if that isn't necessarily a disqualifier. How about that? It isn't suddenly disqualify you. Here's what I'll say: Skaven are, to me, when we talk about criteria number one, is the overall theming and kind of vibes and story of the army cool? One of the coolest. Okay. It's the standard. It is the faction that was like the unique thing from the old world, right? It was sort of this thing everybody in Warhammer, a lot of people glommed onto. It has this like the crazy clan structure that it has. It has this very like cutthroat, ridiculous culture of everybody scrabbling and killing each other to get to the top. It also ends up being a spoiler. So like part two, sure. Question number 2 is, are there interesting characters doing interesting things? And like, yes, is the answer. Thankful is an interesting character. He does do interesting things in the world. Like he's
literally doing the exact same things that he was doing in the old world.
I don't disagree with
nothing has changed.
I don't disagree with that. Okay, I don't. I really don't. You're right. Okay, they have not meaningfully changed their behavior in between the old world and AOS. You're not wrong. I cannot push back.
Like, let me do this by contrast. So
sure.
a great picture of this is FEC. Okay, FEC for me is truly the poster child of reimagining and reinvention. It went from like a Nosferatu vampire, like weird, like clinger, right, of Soulblight, to a well-realized identity in of itself. And it was tied into a new kind of like lore anchoring,
sure,
right? And that was actually really never realized before we got their throne and before we got their endless spells, right? It wasn't in any of the models, but they looked at the range that they had and said, what is this in AOS, and made this super compelling narrative, right? That just draws you in with literally almost no new models. Basically the same amount of models that Skaven had. And so this is the two examples I would say. Like Skaven may be passable. Like they for me would be like a 3, right? But like FEC truly is a rock star 5. Like they are interesting and dynamic and just a fascinating faction.
Well, let's just get the obvious out of the way. I mean, FEC's on the good list. I don't think any of us are sending these boys home with anything less than a top score. We all know it's amazing. Right. We all know lore-wise it's a poster child for like how to tell a compelling story. By the way, this would have failed the second test up until recently of like having individual characters doing interesting things. But actually now that has changed. You've got a lot of interesting things going on actually in the Skaven with Gerald, or whatever his name is, the Geralian, whatever. I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. The Herald from the first book, who was like an interesting little compelling dude going around saving people. You've got the Summer King getting active. You know, Usharon here, obviously, who's pictured.
Well, but there's been rumors of Usharon from the first book.
I understand, but he wasn't actually doing
we've known
anything.
That something is coming.
Yeah,
right? Sure. Yeah.
But like now, as of recently, I think we finally closed the loop, not just because of the new models, but we actually told the completion of the story. Not just before they would have been like they would have been passed with flying colors on number 1 of my criteria, but they would have failed horribly on number 2 and 3. Because they were basically completely unimpactful in the world to the larger story, and they had no interesting characters doing anything. If we had done this a year ago. Okay.
But I would still say that they were still a spoiler faction within Death. Like they were the thing that broke the Death mold.
In what book?
Right? Because they were the thing.
In where? What lore?
The Realm Gate, was it Realm Gate world or worse? Like they were the faction that like didn't go along with Nagash's like edifice of like his monolithic.
Yeah, Usharon rebelled himself initially a long time ago. Yes, in the Age of Myth.
Right, and so like, and that's been like, and so they were the most interesting of the Death factions, right? Because they weren't just part of the standard hierarchy, and that was even before we even had a model or an image.
We wanted them to be that way, but that's like saying, you know, Rome is the most interesting lore today because 2,000 years ago they conquered the Mediterranean. Tom, they haven't been too active for a while. Okay, like
indeed, but and yet everybody's obsessed.
They're not winning a modern narrative contest. Okay. And so that's my point. But either way, it doesn't matter. FEC certainly ticks all 3 boxes now, regardless of what it was in the past. They're in. There's no question. They're the easy slam dunk.
I agree. I agree with that.
Okay. So we'll swing back to Skaven in a minute because that was what got us on this. But let's hit some other ones here. So other candidates I've put here on the good. Let me go to my number 2. Okay. Because I don't think change is actually a compelling standard to go by. I think it can be an interesting thing in their favor. Like what you pointed out there is it's not that the change itself is good. It's that they did something interesting with the faction and the lore that made it compelling within the setting. But if it's already good, if it's already a compelling story, then yeah, okay, they can act the same, right? If it was already great, like you can take... Okay, do you like the movie Clueless, Tom?
It's fine.
I like the movie Clueless, but you can pick your thing.
This
has been redone. Sure. Like Shakespearean stories get redone and reset in the modern world often. They don't change the story.
10 things I hate. 10 things I hate about you.
Sure. Why not? Okay, let's pick that one. Great. We can pick whatever you want, right? Multiples of these.
Right.
Whatever. Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. Like, I don't care. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, these aren't fundamentally changing the story. It's the same story. Same characters doing the same actions. It's just changing the setting. But it's still a compelling story because it was a compelling story.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Okay. Anyways. All right. Seraphon, my number 2. Okay. I think Seraphon absolutely ticks these boxes. Let me sell you here for a moment. 1, the initial lore for Seraphon was wild. Like, wild. They took as big a swing with the initial lore of Seraphon as they did with FEC, right? When they were like, the only thing that's alive is like one immortal undead frog on a spaceship, and he just remembered the rest
and everything
of his
else is memory
into existence, right? Like, whoa. And you know, they're born of like star energy, and then he forms these dreams that he has
like
in his
celestial demons.
Yeah, into this. They're weird celestial demons that are sort of these creations that he melds from imagination into reality, right?
In Stardust.
Stardust, yeah, exactly. And then people were like, whoa, step too far, right? With FEC, everybody was immediately on board. And with Seraphon, everybody was like, no, I want real physical lizards, right? Okay. So then they were like, all right. And then they were like, yeah, but also, once he remembered them, then they started going off and forming spawning pools. And now there's actual and those gave birth to like physical lizards from the spawning pools, right? He landed some like, spaceships and made real lizards. And now there's 2 varieties of them running around. There's the coalesced, the real ones who, you know, live in swamps and come out of spawning pits and hunt in deep dark woods and are, you know, cannibalistic lizard creatures. Those are real. And then also they're still remembering back things, and they're still using that lore. Like in the most recent Broken Realms or whatever. But wait, that's not what we're on right now. What are we on right now? Dawnbringers, sorry. In the most recent Dawnbringers, Croak does this again. He's just like, okay, hold on, we need an army. Got him. Right. Like they're still doing that. And I think that's just really fascinating. That they have this crazy race that's just dinosaurs riding dinosaurs, which is already wild enough, shooting laser guns, driving around spaceships. Like, this is all true. Tell me the lie.
No, you're right. Okay. It is. It's all true.
Everything I said is true. It's all true, all of it. Yeah, exactly. And then also they're just like, some of them are real savage lizards and some of them are ultra intelligent, beyond imagination spacefarers that remember bury their friends into existence. Like, that is crazy, man. And it's very AOS, let me say that. And then do you have test number 2 was, do you have interesting characters doing interesting stuff? And absolutely is the answer there. You know, Croak has been a major player in like basically every story arc, as have some other Seraphon characters. Okay. And he still is. As I mentioned, he just remembered an army into existence trying to kill, what's his name? Kragnos. And number 3, are they impactful to the overall narrative? And once again, the answer there is yeah, like 1,000% yes. Like in every one of the major story arcs, Seraphon have shown up as sort of a major faction that is there assisting order or doing something big or fighting in big battles and getting involved in the broader sweeping narrative in some way. They've saved cities like from utter ruination and destruction, that kind of thing. So like, yeah, they're just they pass all the tests.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think that. Let me say it this way: I don't rate the need for them to be impactful in the story. Like that's not something that I require in order for them to be like, um, like to talk about the best lore of an army, right? Like because to me, like yes, I think they need to have characters doing things.
Sure.
And I agree with some of the other criteria, but I don't need them to be major players.
The reason I like them being major players, or at least players, it doesn't need to be major, but players where they're impactful in the world, is because usually there's a reasoning for this. And my reasoning is thusly. What usually defines the character of an army, what usually sort of reveals its true self, is not through just hearing about it in the void, but in watching it interact with the world and with the other factions. Okay? In bouncing up against the other factions, in having in being involved in conflicts, whether physical or sort of ideological, right, is truth about their own self and story and narrative revealed, right? And I think that that's really important, because then it's not just the story that's told about them, but the story that they are, that they live, that they do through their actions in the world, right? And so that's why I think it's a meaningful criteria. Okay. But that's why I also rated it number 3. I think it is like those were in order of importance, right? But I think it's there. All right, let's talk about a couple others here. Let's just jump down to the other Chaos faction I threw in up here. Papa Nurgle. Okay.
I understand. Like, I already know where you're going to go with this, with the Realm of Life and them having a very real like presence and like a very compelling narrative, and I hear that. But how can you choose Nurgle over Slaanesh? Like, if any Chaos faction actually had a really interesting, compelling narrative, it was the reimagining Slaanesh as that of one that is chained, right? And in reorienting the entire motivation of the faction to be this interesting, compelling hunt and search for freedom and pretenders and all of the things that have branched up in the midst of that. Like, yes, I understand that Nurgle has had a lot of development with in the books and stuff like that, right? But to me, like, Slaanesh seems way more compelling, especially with relationship to the various elf factions and how those have come into being and yada yada.
Yeah. I thought a lot about Slaanesh when I was putting this together.
Okay.
My short answer is because I just think Nurgle is actually a better story. And what I mean by that is, going to my criteria, obviously Nurgle has a cool overarching story. Many of the Chaos gods do. If that was the only test, then they'd kind of all be up here, right? Most of them have good pitches. They got a good elevator pitch, They're concise, they're compelling, and that's because whenever they created these goofball ideas for Chaos, they did accidentally or sort of, whether it was accident or genius, I can't say, but they did strike upon fairly compelling concepts for the sort of forces of Chaos and what they represent and are, and the sort of weaknesses of humanity. They don't align specifically to any other concept of previous failings like that. They're not the 7 deadly sins. They're not this, that, the other thing. But there's something compelling about them and what they represent, the sort of carnal, primal fears. Yeah. I think Nurgle has sort of the most compelling of all of them, because it is this weird mix of joy and exaltation and also misery and suffering. And I think that cacophony is well realized in their story. So that would be my thing on the first one. Like, they are interesting because they have comical characters in their ranks. They have, you got little nurglings, you got Sloppity Bile Piper, you goofballs like this, right? but ultimately it's horrendous, right? It's a completely horrific thing they represent. I mean, there are few things, if the last years have taught us that there's few things we fear more in the universe than rampant disease, right?
Right.
To remind
Right.
us all of our fragility. I've said before that sort of Nurgle's one of the few that kind of really, really carries into the modern world as like an ever-present fear. And so I think that's there. And number two, Nurgle certainly has characters doing things. I mean, they show up all over the place doing a ton of things, and they're highly pivotal in the story, as you mentioned, like the Realm of Life and their interplay with Alariel and everything like that. But you also have what's his name, Torgilius or whatever, like the guy who the early Stormcast story where he sort of is trying to kill Alariel and then eventually gets redeemed and becomes a Stormcast hero. Like that guy was a Nurgle character for a long time, and he's very sort of fascinating. That journey that he goes on, like that's quite a hero's journey, quite a redemption arc, you know. And so I think that's what, like, they've just chosen to do a lot of interesting things with Nurgle. It sits very well into the AOS story. They've used Nurgle a lot, even in periods of time when Chaos wasn't at sort of the apex of storytelling. When Death was at the apex, they were often fighting Nurgle. In the current story, people are often fighting Nurgle, right? Like they're just always involved heavily in the story because I think that that sort of yin yang and the wheel and everything that they have about them, it really sits them in a story in a way where you can picture them always being around, always being a threat, always being present, even when their dumb little plague bearers aren't hopping directly into your face, in a way that like Khorne just can't. Right. Khorne doesn't represent the same sort of like existential threat to life. It's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a bunch of marauding lunatics coming over the horizon, Whereas Nurgle, you can like go a whole book and basically see no Nurgle characters, and yet still have Nurgle be incredibly impactful on what's going on in the world at that moment, as many cities books and things like that have shown, right? So I think that's what brings them up for me. I mean, are they FEC? Nah. I mean, like, I think that's not going to happen. But I think they're good. So that's my defense of Nurgle, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to argue that way, I mean, I would say the same about Slaanesh. Like, if there are any from Chaos that should be on this page, I would argue it would be Slaanesh and possibly Nurgle. And the only reason why I say Slaanesh is that, like, the lore of Slaanesh has literally birthed 3 different armies.
Sure.
Right? Like it has truly spawned out 3 AOS armies, one imagining of a current army, and then the whole scale, like, from new cloth creation of 2 others.
Yeah.
Because of what Slaanesh is and how Slaanesh has impacted and shaped the world. And like the Realm Gate Wars and the everything, right? The all points, like a lot of like I think about like even the entry of like the OC arc into the story.
Yeah,
like
I get
that
it.
was pressing because Archeon was in the process of almost freeing Slaanesh.
Sure.
Right? Like that was the and so I would argue that Slaanesh has continually had a presence in the story far outsized for what Slaanesh is actually doing, which is just being chained in between the space between worlds.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know, man. Slaanesh has seemed like they had one good idea and then they just never did anything else with it. That's the issue. Like, I don't disagree with any of your points about, sort of them being able to bring Doc,
I mean,
Lumineth, and IDK all to bear out of the sort of conception of how Slaanesh changed or didn't change the elven souls they recovered. And that's fine.
Right.
Like, it just, that isn't Slaanesh doing anything. That's like a happenstance of the story they're telling with elves. Like, I would credit that to IDK's story or to Doc's story or whatever.
I mean, maybe.
Like, I'm not giving that credit to Slaanesh. Doc is interesting for reasons that Doc is interesting.
Sure. I mean, and I acknowledge that. Again, I would say that
Like Aphrodite's not interesting
Yeah.
because she popped out of Zeus's head. She's interesting because she's
Sure.
Aphrodite or whatever, right? I think that's the right goddess
Right.
who they
Right.
took out of his head. I don't remember.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, no, I mean I hear that. But I think that Slanesh, the presence of Slanesh, the denial of Slanesh, has continually been a lore pressure point that has come up again and again and again and again, right? And like I would have never guessed that they would have went a decade without freeing Slanesh.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, if edging were alone were a lore enough reason to get there, then this would be a winner hands down. Okay. But that's just it. It's just that, like, the concept that you talked about, Slanesh is in prison, right? And there's pretenders who are claiming to take the crown, and invaders who are all just trying to be champions, and seekers who are hunting after, where Slanesh is to free them. That's it. That's the story, man. That's like it. That was the initial story in the first GHB or whatever, where they delivered that breakdown, or first core rule book, like AOS 1, book 1, big book.
Sure.
That was the story they laid out. And that's my exact point. In 8 years, they have done jack all. Nothing. There's no compelling characters doing anything, except, like, I guess you could argue maybe Sigvald has kind of shown up a couple times in semi-compelling ways.
Which has been super, super fascinating, like how he came out of Shadespire and the Glass, and like, I don't know, man. Like,
yeah, I just
again,
what did they do in the world? What are those characters actually impacting? Not much. Like, in the broader story, Slanesh is a footnote, and it has not bothered to evolve in any way or continue to move. Like, the FEC story wasn't just the Summer King. Hey, the Summer King's super cool.
Sure.
It was, here's the Summer King, and yes, he's coming back, and he's involved with the Stormcast, trying to find how to fix the Stormcast problem of reforging, and also there's this weird subplot with Neferata and the blood of Usharan getting smuggled into the cities through wine to drive people mad, and like, there's like, and also they're liberating the people of the Great Parch, and like sending them to freedom, and they're all exalting this new thing. Like, they didn't just have the idea of their nobles, but they're crazy, and then stop. Right? They built on it, and that's what's never happened with Slanesh. That's why it's not here. I just don't think it's good. That's it. I mean, why isn't he here? Because it's not good. They just haven't done enough. They had a great seed. They planted a great seed, and then that's it. They never watered it. They never helped. They never let it grow. Right.
Yeah. Well, again, if you find, my argument would be, if you find Nerval compelling, I think Slanesh has been equally compelling. That said, I don't think any of them have been compelling. I think you can just remove chaos from this slide.
All right. Well, let's move to a non-chaos one. Let's talk about Gits.
Sure.
Do Gits belong on this list? Of the good.
No.
Okay. Why?
No, I know one character. The Loon King. I don't actually know what he's doing. Like, it seems like this entire faction has solely been created to be a spoiler faction. Like, it pops in and ruins things as a wave or tidal force of destruction. Like, it's not, to me, it's not interesting in any meaningful way.
Well, you know two characters.
Trug, sure. Trug and the Loon King.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Trug and the Loon King, and even Trug was like, look, trolls, right? Like, yay, they now have a leader to lead them. I don't know. I just, like, I love Gits, but for me, like, their lore isn't what's selling them. Like, that's not what's interesting to me.
Okay.
So to me, if I'm going to be honest, things like, when I look at this slide, like, we can get to cities here in a minute, but when I look at this slide, like, well, let's talk about yours, and I want to then talk about what I think is missing from this slide, because I think there are probably one or two.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, let me sell Gits here.
So I struggle with, try to sell Gits. Go ahead.
So on test number 1, overarching narrative, right? I think they have a cool overarching story. Their lunacy, their obsession with the bad moon, all this kind of stuff is very fun. They have a really fun personality. They have a lot of character to them. They're wacky and yet dangerous and all those kinds of things, right? They're just little lunatics. Okay. And, they love fungus and being underground. They have the Everdank. I mean, come on now, man. The Everdank. That's wild.
Sure.
At any rate, interesting characters doing things. I mean, obviously, yes, Trug has been hugely impactful in the story, even if as a force of nature in most recent books. But Skragrot's been around for a while and doing things. Like the Loon King has showed up in many stories that they've done throughout this. As a
but what has he done to impact the realms?
What has Skragrot specifically done to impact the realms? Yeah.
Yes. Tell me a realm that he lives in.
It's all a fair point. It's all fair. No, I agree.
Like he showed up in narratives, but like I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what his motivations are other than chaos and following, chaos lightly, and following the bad moon, right?
Well, he is just kind of a mad prophet, so yes. I mean, I don't know that he has super motivations outside of whatever the bad moon tells him to do at that moment, which is fair. So I'll agree it's weaker on that point. But they do have some characters doing things. And then the third point of like, are they impactful to the story? I mean, yeah, they've shown up a lot. Like they are often in the story doing things, being a force, being a force of opposition, getting in fights, being like present in the world. Okay. They were one of the hardest ones for me to put on here. Like, I'm not going to say, again, I don't know that I'd like slam dunk these guys, but to me, they felt like a cut above slightly is, I guess, the answer. Like they just, for me, they were like the bottom of good is what I'll say. They had just enough of my criteria going on that I was like, yeah, they've done stuff with them. They've tried to place them in here interesting, because the flip side is they could be what they were in the old world. You mentioned like change earlier, and again, I'm not counting that as a criteria, but they could be what they were there, which was just wrapped into the broader orcs and goblins and a running joke that orcs just beat up and they had no actual point. Like they were completely irrelevant. Right. They were basically a nuisance. Right. Whereas at least here, they are this interesting faction with their own self-contained. Like they did grow and change a lot moving into AOS and beyond, and they've continued to sort of grow that story over time. So that's why I say it. Like to me, if this is like, they're like the 3.6. You know what I mean? Like they just round up.
Sure. Like they barely slide into this. Yeah. No, I hear that.
All right.
Let's talk about cities. I think we can both agree on cities.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you make this list and don't put cities on the good. That's let me just start.
I agree.
Opening shot.
I agree. No, I agree with that, because there is no other faction in the game that I'm waiting for them to make models for a sub faction part of their army from the lore. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Like I'm naming here like the Order of Azir.
I understand.
Right? Like I was hoping it would be in this book. It wasn't. We got a couple keywords, which I'm excited about. Right? So it's like they are hinting at what they might do or where they could go in development. But even with what we have, they are quite well developed. We have individuals doing weird things or doing impactful like characters, even if it's like stupid wheel lady, right? Like
yes. Like by all three of our tests, it's easy. Do they have a cool overall story? Yes, they're like the foothold.
There's an entire narrative campaign that's going on right now.
Exactly. They're like the foothold of humanity's survival, right? Obviously directly compelling. Do they have individual characters doing interesting stuff? Oh my god, a laundry list. Callus and Toll and yes, Sinestra in the most recent story and on and on and on and on throughout the history of AOS, right? Do they take part in the world? Yes, 1,000% yes. Most of the stories happen around them. I mean, for God's sakes, Anvilgard fell. It isn't even a city anymore, right? It got or it's not a city of Sigmar in that way, at least. Yeah. And got taken over by Marathi. Like, this is a city that this is a faction, sorry, that has undergone a tremendous amount of tumult and change and action in the story with its characters, with its peoples, with its aesthetics, with its themes. And it's also quite broad, right? And when you look at all the different sub factions, different cities, and how they place across the realms, honestly, they give us like an incredible insight into the nature and what do I want to say, the sort of tone of each realm, right? As we look through the city's eyes as to what that city looks like in that realm and how it acts and stuff like that. Like, I mean, it's I think it's absolutely there. 1,000% is there.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, what's not here?
So there are two that jump out to me that seem like they would be go-to low-hanging fruit. Maybe three.
Okay.
The first of these is going to be probably one of the most contested, and that would be Ideneth.
Okay.
It is a super fascinating faction.
Okay.
That has had real impact on the world. In what I mean by that is like they are like they have repeatedly been they have shown how dangerous the world is, not because of chaos, but because of the nature of the world itself, right?
Sure.
Like they are a threat to the cities. They've continued to press in. They showed up in the Malign Portent story with the unlocking of the sea there, with where the unlocking of the tomb that Catacross came out of. They're important in that narrative. They were important in the narrative with Marathi when she moved on Anvilgard. They were a big part of the movers and shakers that took place through multiple combats and through multiple books in that story as well. They have a really compelling like tension with Lumineth as another like area of conflict is that I would say. And it's just a super compelling we have vampire, like vampire fish elves. Like what more could you like soul sucking? Like just even the nature of like the nature of what they are reframed what it meant to be order. Like this is not a good collect. Like these aren't the good guys.
I
right?
get you. Sure.
And
like
so for
Doc,
all of
they
those reasons,
the
I would
nature of
argue.
order beyond just the good guys.
Yep. And so for me, like of my three, they would probably be the weakest, but I think that they potentially have a place on here, especially over something like Gitz, right? Because they've had a meaningful presence. They have a compelling, interesting like lore and caste system, and um, like I can't say the same thing about something like Gitz, right? On like societal structure or whatever, and yet like I already know those things. That doesn't even really manifest itself in models, and yet it is a part of who they are. And I'm not really an IDK person, and I know these things about who or what they are. So I would say that it's that they present a compelling sort of story that is just a very interesting engagement.
Okay. I'll briefly give you my reasons why I didn't put them here. I don't disagree with anything you said. I think to me, at best, they'd be in the decent. Because yes, they've had some moments. They lack any real characters that you can grab onto other than Volturnus, and even then, Volturnus doesn't do that much in the world. And
but we also have our other Tidecaster person that's running around with Knave now. Like we have him front and center, like doing things. Like
I mean, she's going to accidentally give Stormcast credit because she's part of the Black Talons, and that's more interesting there than she is. She's not acting like an IDK character; she's acting like a Stormcast character, right? And getting in their wacky adventures. If Wolverine goes over and joins the Avengers, that doesn't make the X-Men more interesting. It just makes the Avengers more interesting. Okay. All right. That's what you're describing. So the like ultimately they just fail the test for me to be like in the good because there hasn't been enough done with them. They still always end up being like there's spooky boys in the mist. And it's like, yeah, okay. It's a cool story. Like, they do have a very cool origin story. They do have a cool theme. Like, I'm not disagreeing with any of that. It is all good. For me, I would probably put them in the decent. With the next slide, I wouldn't probably put them into the good. I just don't think they've done enough. I don't think they have enough characters. I don't think they have enough impact. They wouldn't quite make it to me. But I understand that you're saying they wasn't the strongest. But okay, cool.
What's next? If not them, then why not Lumineth?
Oh my God!
No. Because Lumineth meet all of those. Lumineth meet all of those criteria.
Yeah,
they do, and they have a major character
that has
showed up.
As does what's his name?
Not just a little bit. Not just a little bit, but a lot, right? And I with that, I will then also say Doc. Doc is also a natural with Marathi and with her presence and her pushing. Like both of them represent actual movers and shakers in the world that are doing something, that have their own motivations, that are that have agendas, that have agency, and that are interesting, compelling lore. I mean, like, as much as I hate Lumineth, let's be very clear. Like, the range did not take me, and yet the caste system turned sideways rather than being a hierarchy, rather than being these like castes of like elemental aligned temple, like reimagining of Avatar, right? Essentially, like it is an interesting like elves seeking to both unify with the world, but then also, like, rather than trying to master it, right, seemingly having experienced a dose of humility, because that's hypothetically what happened when they decided to pair with the elemental spirits rather than mastering and controlling, right? Which is antithetical to elf, like the historical elf stuff. So again, interesting story stuff. They have actual main characters. They've made major impacts on the story. Why wouldn't they be in this slide?
Because they're actually boring. Like, because they're legitimately boring. They fail the first test.
I think that's your bias.
I really don't.
That's your bias.
I really don't.
No, that's your bias for not liking
one.
elves.
I like number one is the overarching story of the thing. Interesting, compelling, so on. And I think they just fail that test. I really think they do. LRL specifically. What's their overarching grabbing elevator pitch narrative? Elves seeking perfection, bonding with elementals, I guess. Okay. All right. I guess, man. Like, okay. Cool. Now, it's funny because I do actually think number 2 and number 3, you're not wrong. Like, Teclis and, to a lesser degree, Eltharion and or the twins, even, we could point out, they've shown up in a couple interesting stories, actually, in a pretty compelling way. If you remember back in Broken Realms when they were bouncing around.
I do.
And doing some fun stuff. Like, that's actually where they've had more interest. When you get down to, like, what are their individual elves doing, they've actually come across in some more interesting ways. I mean, like, Teclis is obviously hugely impactful going up against Nagash and having that big showdown and so on. And then number 3 is, are they heavily involved in the story in the world? It took them a while, but yes, they did get there. Again, we could, like, if we talk about at different points in time, they've been more or less involved. But for the moment, they tend to show up and do things and be involved in some way. So I'm willing to give you credit for that. I just literally think it's number 1 holds it against it. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I am biased. I don't know. Like, I look, I'm not going to say I'm not. We all have our biases. I just genuinely think their overarching story doesn't have the same compelling as anybody else on this slide. Now, the one that you're right, that I do think I left off here and is a criminal mistake that I left off, is Doc. Because, like, that's from stem to stern, it passes every test with flying colors. Like, 1, 2, 3, all easily true. Story's awesome. Story's compelling. Their main characters their main character in Marathi is obviously incredible.
She just carries everything.
Yeah, I mean, like, what an incredible story. You have somebody who goes through apotheosis as a god and goes through that whole story. You have somebody conquering a city of their own ally and then bringing it to heel, and who's also then, like, highly impactful in the world, but, like, shows up to save other people later. Like her former allies. Now she's back and helping them again. She's scheming and plotting, but always to her own ends, but also to save the world. And, it's like, you're right. Doc should be here. Bottom line, like I left Doc off, and that's a mistake. I think they easily make it into this category.
I agree. I think Doc makes it in. I still think Lumineth does, but again, like, you know, as Keith Rogers says, they're elves that had a civil war, turned their homeland into a wasteland as a result, learned to work together with elemental spirits to try to make amends and not die. And I would argue is also secretly corrupted by chaos, right? Like, we get glimpses of that. No, and I'm not being flippant about that.
That has never been mentioned officially in their lore. This is completely
Have
your
you
own.
seen their map?
This is
their map is literally no. Their map is literally the Chaos Star.
I understand.
Like their homeland.
I understand. I get what
this
I
is
get,
not my. No.
This is your tinfoil hat Pepe Silva crap. Okay, it's not in
their
lore.
It's there. It is because it is there.
Because their map is a circle, does not end with lines on it. Does not.
It's not just a circle. No, this is not Zenestra's home. Let's be very clear about that. Like,
as soon as if they did something, see, Tom, this is the problem with you and lore. Okay, you do the same crap with everything else that we like. This is an old complaint I have with Tom. Is he will self-insert his fanfic nonsense into lore and then build a love of it off of that. Look, maybe you're right. Maybe eventually, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 2 years from now, 6 months from now, I don't care. There's some story written that shows that the corruption of chaos has been embedded in LRL since the beginning, and it manifests in this particular way. And if they do something interesting with that, cool. Then they've done something interesting with that. But right now, that is nothing. It's nothing. Because I don't care if it's true or not. It isn't impactful on the story. And the only time things matter is when they have an impact on the story. Not just if you can Pepe Silva it on a wall and go, look, this is probably true. Who gives it if it's probably true? Okay? It doesn't matter. Because until it manifests in the actions and things that are happening in the story, it's not interesting. Period.
I think you're just biased against elves. That's all I'm saying.
Got it.
Elves and Chaos Dwarves.
Yes.
Because you don't believe they exist. Okay. So those are the ones that I would say that potentially deserve a place on this slide.
That's fine.
But and then from that point on, we drop off, and I fully recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
Like Stormcast could potentially be a contender, but they're just boring. They've hinted about some interesting stuff.
Well, let's move to the
decent.
Really hold on. Let's not get
the other one.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yep.
Who was your other one?
I would say the other one that would potentially would be Soulblight. And the only reason why I bring that in is because Nagash is such a major player. Like, we had an entire edition. Centered around his narrative, right? Of him breaking the world or breaking the multiverse. Mm-hmm. And so arguably Nagash has a place there, but I say that to say it's hard to say Soulblight because he actually sits in all death factions. And so it's hard to actually identify where exactly he lives, because you have functionally in Soulblight, you have a bunch of independent fiefdoms which are doing their own things, and are not actually operating in any unified fashion anytime they've actually shown up.
Sure.
And so I think that would be, if anything keeps Nagash off this list, it's just that no one actually maps to Nagash. Like, Nagash doesn't map to any single faction.
Yeah, hold on. I want to address something George Sutherland Howard said in the comments. He said, not gonna lie, I fundamentally disagree with that take. Lore for wargaming is to provide a platform and inspiration for people to do their own things with their own armies, and these sorts of half-truths are cool. George, you're exactly right. That is what the purpose of a lot of these things are to be. I mean, it's not the only purpose, but that's part of it. I mean, the other part of it is to, like, tell good stories. They also want to, like, sell books that are full of these things. They want to make the armies compelling to you to buy, so that way you can sort of, mentally align with the force.
And so you can attach to it.
Yeah.
Like, the key is so that you can attach to it, right? Like, that you can find some type of resonance.
Yeah, it's trying, like, the lore is obviously doing many things, right? And that's, but certainly what you're describing, and, like, being able to tinfoil hat with it and having strands and things like that you can pull on for your wacky theories is also a good part of it. I don't disagree with that, but that's not judging the lore. I'm not judging the lore based on the fact that they have some like interesting strands you could kind of pull on if you like look at it sideways. That's just Tom being an interesting thinker with how he approaches his armies. That's not the lore of the army. Okay? The lore, like, yes, the function of the greater story is to create threads that people can then take and make their own. No disagreement. Okay? But I'm not taking everyone's threads. Like, 7 other people have 7 other wild theories about LRL. I'm not taking all those into account either, man. Okay. Like, that's not the story. Is the story that's presented. Okay. It's not like you bring your own meaning to it, man. Yeah, of course you do. When you make your army, right? And you should. And that's one of the coolest things about wargaming is that we can. But that's not when we're talking about like comparing the lore. I'm looking at what's on offer. That's it.
Not what Tom's invented.
Not what Tom's invented. So there you go, George. That's my answer. Like, you're right. I don't disagree with anything you said, but this just has nothing to do with when you're doing a lore comparison. Okay. All right. The decent. This is the people who get 3s. Okay? They're passable.
Yep.
First of all, I'll agree with, based on your previous argument, I think both IDK and LRL should be in this picture. Let's just start there. Okay? Based on what you said before. So I'm with that. Like, no argument. To me, they would have both crossed enough to be here. To be like, yeah, they're decent. They're not failing. I want to be super clear, right? Like, you get a 3. That most people get a 3. Right? And so like this is like, to me, this is where S2D actually falls. Some people were like beating me up on the previous slide, like, why isn't S2D here? I've got a simple answer: because they fail multiple of the tests. Overall, overarching story on S2D, yeah, pretty cool, pretty interesting, pretty compelling stuff. I actually have read some of the old world like Chaos short stories, and by the way, I think this is one of the places where the old world lore can continue forward, because Chaos never broke. It wasn't like their world got destroyed. It was somebody else's world. Their world has remained consistent ever since, right? They didn't go through an apocalypse. They caused it, right?
Indeed.
And so S2D though fails the test to me, where it's like they have Archeon, they have Bellicor. They're both going around doing things and are cool characters, right? But they don't actually get that involved in the world in a meaningful way. It usually ends up being the individual Chaos Gods armies, rather than like other than Archeon or Bellicor themselves. And we can point at all the interesting things. Obviously, Archeon, through the Realm Gate Wars and through a lot of stuff, was hugely impactful. I'm not trying to minimize what he did or stuff like that.
Right, but he's almost never actually going anywhere. He's almost always defending something.
Yeah. Like my issue is S2D, when you look across the scope of like the stories that get told through Thondio or Broken Realms or right? Like, you can all the sort of big narrative books where those are, and the reason I'm focusing in on those, like Dawnbringers and stuff, is because unlike the novels, those are meant to show kind of the advancement of the broader story in the Mortal Realms, right? And like what's going on. And S2D just really isn't the mover and shaker there. It's almost always the god-based armies that are really doing the work, that are doing the heavy lifting there. That's why I put Khorne and Tzeentch here, because I think they show up pretty frequently in that regard. Again, through characters that are there and that are present and that are doing things. Although Tzeentch, like, maybe not. I could probably jettison them off this list, is my honest answer. But to me, they're their number 1 was really strong. Their number 2 was really weak, and their number 3 is like ever present.
Other than their activity in Excelsius, right?
Yeah.
In the one city, like that was the most interesting that I've ever seen Tzeentch. So I agree with that. I do agree with Frank that like we like S2D do get credit for all the Warcry stuff. Like everything that's been built out in Warcry.
Yeah.
They really do get the credit, and that's been some of the most robust world building motivation, like glimpses of the world, the lived in world that we've seen.
Yeah, you're not wrong there.
And so, but that doesn't push them up to top tier. Like, to be very clear, there's interesting stuff going on there, and there's interesting cultures and stuff like that. But we haven't actually seen them do anything. Like the cities went out and have like terraformed, right, different realms.
Yeah, sure.
Like these people aren't doing anything like that.
Yeah.
We haven't seen any mention of the ninja guys, the Sybarites, or what were those? What were the guys with the fans and the?
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
The Cypher Lords. Like
go.
we haven't seen anything about the Cypher Lords, right?
Sure.
Like they like we had some neat models, right? But they haven't actually done anything, and so they do fail some parts of this test. And so I agree they need to be on this page, but they did bring some very compelling world building through the Warcry stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'll openly admit I hadn't considered that the Warcry thing, and that's actually a really good point. Yeah, no doubt. Okay. Khorne I put here because Khorne is just kind of an ever-present player. They're always around. Korgus Kull is pretty interesting. He's clearly been cooking.
Get the hell out of here.
In a lot.
I mean, Khorne is so boring. Okay. Like I don't know how you could put Khorne here and not put OBR.
That's fair.
OBR does the same thing, collects bones, except they collect more than just skulls. They collect the whole body, and they have they've been way more interesting in the narrative. Khorne is basically, other than the initial push,
sure, like
they haven't really done anything significant. Like they were the initial villain that the storm hosts were framed against.
Sure. I'm gonna say this: I would jettison Khorne long before I'd put OBR in. Let me just go ahead and answer this because I've seen some OBR defense in the comments. I'm gonna go ahead and smack that down real hard right now. OBR's overall lore is interesting enough. Catacross is cool. He's got a nice sort of attitude about him. He's a cool dude. His activities in
what about Arkan? Arkan the Black.
I mean,
the one ever loyal to Nagash.
Yeah, again, I don't know, man. I don't know what to do with Arkan. Like Nagash, I don't know where to credit him to. Okay, I'm not sure what category he's adding to. Right? I know. I understand.
He is truly.
I understand he's part of OBR or part of the OBR army in the book. I get it. I get his war scrolls in that book. Okay.
As an aside, can I? I want to go off on a brief model tangent real quick.
Go for it.
I've been building the Mortarks this last week or so, and I just have truly a new appreciation, truly a new appreciation for the design elements that began in those models and how those have been carried through to the various armies.
Yeah.
And so how we can look at Manfred and the aesthetics of the armor for his Mortark and for his death pony thing, his death bat pony thing.
Yeah.
And I see echoes in all of the the Blood Knight armor. And then likewise with Arkan, all of the aesthetics that we ended up seeing with the scarab banded armor in Arkan stuff is part and parcel that became the hallmark of the OBR aesthetic. And so I just it was just such masterful foreshadowing, sure, right, of the model trajectories or taking those models and then letting them become the paradigmatic examples of what those things were.
Well, and to that end, so, that's why Soulblight Gravelords are here and not OBR. OBR, and this is let me see, somebody had the comment. Catacross himself has a pretty good story, I agree. But W. Henry said, OBR lost one battle and have done nothing since. Beautiful. Love it. Summary. Right? Yep, they stomped in, they took a castle, they then lost and retreated back to their castle, and now Catacross, as near as I can tell, has just been stomping around that castle being angry for a while. Right? What do you do here? The Bone Top is a cool idea.
He escaped. Catacross escaped from the Storm Vault. Remember, we had Storm Vaults.
Yeah, I get it. That's where he came from. And then, like I said, he's a cool dude. I'm not arguing he's not a cool dude. He is. D-list Doctor Doom is cool. Okay? Even D-list Doctor Doom is still cool.
Bone Daddy Doctor Doom.
Yeah.
but I mean, Arkin was like faithfully making armies. He's been spending all this time making these armies so
Again,
that when
Arkin
Cataclysm
and
arrived,
Nagash are just outside of it. I don't know what to do with these two because he's just always with Nagash. He's
I
just Nagash's puppet. Like I'd have to give credit to
uh
every Death faction for anything Arkin does. Like everything that when Arkin and Nagash were planning the thing that caused endless spells to happen, you know, the big soul quake, he wasn't acting as part of
yeah,
OBR. He was just
yeah, he
being
was.
Arkin the Black.
That was pre. No, that was pre OBR.
I
He was
understand that.
setting
That's
the
what I'm saying.
stage for
He
for
was
his
most
people to
certainly
arrive.
not. He was most
He
certainly
was.
not.
No, because all of that happened before the storm vaults, right? And so like what he was doing was he was they were carefully orchestrating the return of Cataclysm. That's what that's what it was all about.
Oh my god. Here we go. The giant rat that makes all the rules. This is his name. OBR lore is the Darth Vader hallway scene in Rogue One. Yep. Yep. That is exactly correct. That is exactly correct. I have never. End of discussion. We've reached the mountaintop. Okay? Period. That is maybe the best thing I've heard. Now, on the flip side, Soulblight deserves to be in here 100%. Why? Because, one, they've been impactful in a lot of ways. And I'm not just counting what Nagash does here. Okay? I'm saying you have 3 compelling Mortarks, all 3 of whom have shown up a lot, done a lot of different things, even if that's often lose. I mean, they're still involved right now. The whole blood plot with Usharan's blood is a Nephi plot, right? These 3 are like, they're working, right? And so, like, that's, to me, that's actually what's compelling about Soulblight is the Mortarks have a lot of character. They dominate sort of the character for their thing. They've been heavily involved in the world. I see them as sort of they are really, let's be honest, the preeminent sort of Death faction, right? They're basically what grew out of the original one, and it gets tricky because the Death factions have been like all combined and then broken up and then yada 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 over the history of AOS. So like, who's getting credit for whose work here is really hard. Hence the Arkin joke, right?
There's dependency. We just don't know which way to attribute.
Yeah,
that.
like I don't know where to put the points for this.
For an entire edition. For an entire edition, Spirit hosts were just in Soulblight.
Right.
Like for the first edition, all Spirit hosts were in Soulblight. Like, let's not forget that. We only got Nighthaunt when we got to second edition.
Right.
They were Malignants before.
Yeah, sure. And, you know, I think that they're just interesting characters. Cygnus Maximus said, but how are they interesting compared to standard vampires in folklore pop culture? I mean, I don't know that they are or aren't. They're pretty standard vampires, as near as I can tell, right? Like, that is to say they're not doing anything interesting with the concept, really.
In the most recent iteration, we got the two basically breakaways from that. One, we got Russian vampires. Like Russian vampire / bleeding into werewolves.
Okay.
Like, which is weird, but it's a thing. And then we've also, so it's getting into like Eastern vampire lore.
Sure.
And then the other one is moving into like the Mother of Nightmares, Lucavi, like monstrous, like
that's fair. I'll give you the
Castlevania
one for sure.
horror.
Yeah, that
like
very Castlevania.
Like the Castlevania. Yeah.
I mean, you could do a lot more with it, but that's okay. I think Neferata, I think Manfred are very compelling characters. I just think they're interesting in the way they act in the story. Like they're like generally my favorite part of a lot of the stories have been when you actually just get them talking or interacting with each other and sort of scheming and politicking and things like that. They are fascinating. Now, the one I put on here that's sort of the prize that shouldn't be here is ogres, right? I put them on here because of the strength of kind of they do have an interesting overall lore. They've tried to do some interesting stuff with them. This is like
it's just Haywo. Haywo is what's made him big.
Yeah.
Like ogres themselves, like Haywo and his impersonation of the ogres, right? And his championing of them are bigger than any actual named characters in that faction.
Yeah, I think that really they don't deserve to be on the decent. I think they should be moved off. Honest answer, as I've thought about it more. Like, I put them on here because in my head I wanted it to be true, not because it was. I mean, I'll be honest.
Well, so here, I appreciate your honesty. What I would push back is that the one piece that is interesting for us is the like the frost side of it. like with the
Sure.
Everwinter and the like the chasing and all that stuff. Like that is a wonderful setup waiting for an actual like payoff or answer that we've never seen. Like we've never seen them train that storm into like a Stormcast army or right, like to use the nature to their advantage.
Sure.
We've never actually seen them do that yet.
Yep.
But boy, wouldn't that be interesting.
And then you have the one on the list that to me feels like it definitely belongs on the decent, and we haven't talked about it too much, but yes, it's here, and that's just Stormcast.
Yeah.
Like Stormcast aren't great, but they are decent. There's actually lots of really compelling characters. You've got Gardas, you've got Bastion, you've got there's others, right? Neve and the whole Black Talons thing. We mentioned that earlier. I mean, I haven't watched the Black Talon show. I heard it's actually pretty darn good.
I haven't either.
Put it up somewhere where I'll watch it. I'm not buying your stupid streaming service. It's not happening.
I'll let you borrow my login.
Yeah, thanks. But like, they are the poster child faction. There's a statue out front. They generally are involved in everything. They have lots of compelling characters. The problem is they often just don't do enough with them. Like, we have gotten some really cool moments of some really cool interactions with some of the characters where they feel more emotional, resonant, human. Like I don't know what words to use here that aren't loaded. But like, so recently, for example, the interaction between Ionis and Vandus in part 3 of the Dawnbringers was great. Was really good. It was like a page in that whole thing. And it was some of the most compelling narrative that was there, right? Because you really felt like these two had an actual character. And they had different points of view, and they had a clash of ideas, and then the discussion between them, interesting. This sort of Hegelian dialectic happened, and it was interesting what they came to, right? And that's what I'm looking for. Like, have a character, it's a strong enough character, it has some point of view on the world that it's trying to bring to bear through its actions, and it runs up against another character who has a different point of view and wants to take a different set of actions. And the resolution isn't they go punch each other. It's they have to talk it out and have a sort of contest of ideas because this is what ultimately matters, right? And so, I wish they would do more with that. I wish they would, because I think the Stormcast do have the potential to be really, really compelling as protagonists. The idea of fighting a losing war, the idea of like what it means to be a hero, all of this stuff is questions that are like very super part of a lot of classic pieces of literature. We just don't do enough with the actual story. So I don't know.
And it's funny because originally the setting was framed as Chaos won, and now we're rooting for the heroes that are taking back the world, right? Like that was the framing originally when GW kind of pitched what AOS was. Is what happens if the good guys suddenly were on the back foot but win. And what's fascinating is we just don't see them winning anymore. Or if they're winning at a really slow pace.
Yeah.
Because like we have the Realm of Fire-ish and kind of the Realm of Life-ish. And I haven't really seen Stormcast push into any of the other areas. Sure. Not meaningful.
Gur would be the other one, but yeah.
Say what?
Gur would be the other one. Gur.
Oh, Gur. Yeah, sure. Right. Like that's what's happening right now. Certainly. So I don't know. I just it just feels like they're not it's funny, like I say they're not doing enough where they've really been the backbone of the throwing off of the chaos yoke.
Yeah, sure.
And yet we just don't see that. Like we've zoomed into other momentous events, whether those momentous events be things like the Necroquake or the releasing of Catacross, or not the releasing. Well, yes, the releasing of Catacross. Also, the releasing of I don't know. No, what's the big destruction guy? That nobody remembers their name. That guy. Or right, but or even the cities, right? But that has nothing to do with Stormcast. And so I guess my pushback would be that They just don't, for being the star of the show, they don't seem to be doing a lot in the narrative.
Yeah. You know, Kyle Nelson said they need to lean more into their metaphor for the dehumanization of war. And I agree with that to a point. Well, here's how I agree with that. That's one of the metaphors they should lean into with Stormcast. Stormcast should be an examination of what a life of war does and the different reactions one can have to that, right? And the different ways that it can change and alter the perception and the actions and the way that what people fight for, those who keep fighting and remain hopeful, those who give in to ennui and madness and sadness, those who give in to dehumanization and become the monsters because they've stared into the abyss too long. All of those are valid stories.
Do you think the different chambers should embody?
I don't think no. I don't give a crap about any of that.
Okay.
I think that's all stupid.
Okay.
Don't force it into that, right? Make it about what it should be about, characters, right? And like there are probably like this is an incredibly emotionally charged thing, and so having it like told of give me 10 different reactions of what happens to that, right? Of what it means to be at war constantly for your existence, to be a soldier, right? Who is constantly fighting. Yeah?
Yeah. And,
you know, by the way, what I'm asking isn't, and if you think, no, it can only be dehumanizing or it can only be this or that, like, I don't think so. You know, Tom, you and I have been playing D&D for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And when you're playing a D&D character, you're often playing a D&D character that, frankly, fights for a living and kills a lot of things for a long, long time. Many years, often, right? Being in near constant struggles for your life. And yet most of us don't, most games we've played in, our characters don't inevitably become dehumanized monsters. Although they have. Sometimes we've explored that as a concept. Right?
Yeah.
But we've also explored 10 other concepts of how that life of battle changes you. Right? And that's what I want to see. Right? So don't limit it. I think you're right, Kyle, but I don't want to limit it. Like I think there's so much there to explore that they're just leaving fallow on the table. That's the problem. Okay. Is there anyone else who's decent?
Yeah.
I didn't include. I didn't put Slanesh here either, by the way. I really don't think it's even good. They didn't even make this cut for me.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that, but
they got to do something, man.
I hear where you're coming from.
But anyways, I mean, like we introduced Sinessa and Dexessa, and then they got shot to death with arrows and died. That was their purpose. It was really sad. And they've done nothing since. Cool new named greater demons. Dig it. I mean, is there anyone else you think of who should be in here decent? What about KO? I didn't include KO in the decent. They're often showing up in the story. They have some compelling individual characters who are running around and interesting, including their former god, who seems to be like, you know, a deckhand on one of their ships, by all accounts.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. No, I would agree with that. And actually, they've went through a major loss, like as a faction. Like they have a really compelling narrative, to me at least, where they abandon their gods in the face of the overwhelming victory of chaos. And as a noble race, they decided to flee. Like that's very undwarf-like, right? And so it's like I think that there's a fascinating narrative that has been being worked out in the KO story for a very long time. And we've gotten some interesting narratives and some captains and all of that. But they just haven't been a very influential part of the major narrative, right? They haven't been impactful. Like they've showed up, but they haven't been impactful. Does that make sense? Like
I think I probably should have put them in decent, is my honest answer.
Okay.
Like they have enough. Their overarching story, like if I could look at my 3 criteria, their overarching story is pretty cool. Like, you know, Sky Pirate Ultra Capitalists is certainly a compelling, interesting idea. Like that's cool, right? That's 4 words, and I'm like, tell me more. I'm double clicking. I would like to know more.
That's true.
Okay.
It's true. It's true.
And you know, at the same time, like I said, there's lots of characters you meet in the stories that seem pretty cool. They get involved. They do show up in a lot of the books, including in basically every major series they've shown up in some way since their introduction. James Struthers, I said Doc was actually in the good, the great. Sorry, the first one. They were in the high performers. I missed him, but I said that was a mistake. They should have been up there in the high performers. And so we've got Kuhal in the comments really arguing for Fire Slayers. So Tom, I mean, we all know where I'm going to come down on Fire Slayers. I just could not care less.
Yeah.
But why don't you defend Fire Slayers? Should they be on this list?
No, they shouldn't. And the problem is that they just haven't done anything. Like I don't see where they've actually meaningfully showed up. Like they have a story going on in the next county over. Like they're doing things in the world, like hunting their god, hunting their gold, like trying to reassemble Grimnir, and I just it's just not interesting. And it's hard to relate to, and they haven't really had a major presence in any stories. They've shown up occasionally as like mercenaries people hire.
Sure, I mean they have bailed out people, including the Stormcast, on occasions. They bailed out the cities
their own, but as their own agents, that has simply not been happening.
Zombie Monkey 7 says Fire Slayers just can't catch a break anywhere, can they?
No.
Apparently not even on the lore show.
Make better models and story, and again, I have probably more Fire Slayers than most people in the world.
Sure.
And it's just not that's just not a big story army. That's just not a thing.
Okay. I mean, I'm not going to argue this. So, I'm not going to wade into waters that I'm not comfortable in. That's what it comes down to. Like, if you had told me that they belong in decent, then I probably would have said okay, is my answer. I mean, I don't...
No, I don't think they do. Because you can't... Gotrek doesn't get to be lumped in with... Because he's not them. Like, you don't... Like, Fire Slayers don't get to claim Gotrek. Like, that's not a thing.
Sure.
He's not in the faction. He may look like it, but again, he's a different story.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I mean, yes, he's not a Fire Slayer.
And he actually, in fact, hates Fire Slayers. That's like the irony narratively.
Okay. All right. I mean, I'll leave it to it. I know Kuhal's going to rep him, so but we'll let the viewers decide. Fine. Okay.
Indeed.
The worst. I just have a big question mark for this slide. Here we go, Tom. Because this is just the open discussion portion. Who's the worst?
Right.
Who is the absolute bottom? Who has the worst lore in AOS? And then we'll end on who has the best. As we crown a victor. Who is your absolute bottom of the barrel?
I think if I'm gonna be honest, let me double check this.
I have a vote, but I'll wait for you.
Make sure that
Would you like me to say my vote while you're waiting, while you're looking?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's Ironjaws. It's Ironjaws. I haven't heard one person mention him. Not one person in the comments I've been watching. Okay, the entire time we were talking about decent or great, not one person was like, "What about Ironjaws?"
I'm gonna raise you one.
Okay.
I'm gonna raise you one.
Yeah.
Night Haunt.
Yeah, this is the other one that was going to be on my list.
They're sad. Mm-hmm. Like Ironjaws are angry and rampant, but at least they're like making their way through the realms. I don't even know where Night Haunt live. Like, there's no homeland of Night Haunt. They just show up in graveyards.
Sure. I know what you're saying.
Sure, but that's like saying zebras live in Africa. Like, sure, right? Sure. There's no, like, my problem with Night Haunt is it's like, okay, yes, Olander's sad, we get it. But there's no actual, like, motivation as an army or a faction. Like, at least we've seen a major narrative, right, in the Realm Gate Wars with Ironjaws. Mm-hmm. And there was this trajectory and there was this narrative. And it was like, what's his face reborn. I know my audio just messed up because my headphones just died. Like we've had at least one major narrative. For Nighthaunt, we just haven't. Again, sadness. Like we don't actually have any manifest like function or purpose or aim or again homeland or hierarchy or structure. None of that is there. We have characters, and I have no idea what they're doing in the world.
Oh boy, this is a really tough showdown between the two.
Reignor.
I get it.
What is Reignor doing?
I get it. So here's my issue. The reason I would put Nighthaunt above IJ is because, and by the way, I agree we're having like a worst versus worst fight here. Okay, this is like, I don't know, Duralius, our worst fighter has a wooden leg and a real foot. You know, like we're really at the bottom of the barrel here, so whatever. Nighthaunt's overarching narrative themes is cool. Like the condemned, and that they carry the sins of their life through them, and you know, you can see that in the punishments that Nagash manifests for them for being cowardly or for, you know, whatever, right? It's kind of interesting. And Lady O has had a few cool interactions with like Bellicor and other types of characters like that. It's not much. I'm just saying it has happened. Okay. Whereas the Ironjawz, as much as I love them, they're one of my favorite armies. What a complete waste of lore space. They're like angry, punchy orcs. That's it.
Well, I mean, it's no different than like dirty orcs. Like
I disagree, because the Cruel Boys have Gobsprak, who's like the mouth of Kragnos, and is like, he's super deep involved in like plots and machinations and doing things in the most recent story. And at least like their overarching story is more interesting. They have characters doing something. They're like participating. Again, I still don't think they make decent. They're getting a 2, okay, on their lore review. All right, I'm not trying to defend Cruel Boys over here. I'm just saying, like, when it comes to Ironjawz, I'm not firing the Cruel Boys. That they can be on a pip, right? We can get them a performance improvement and get them into something good. But the Ironjawz, man, there's nothing. It is an empty world out there. They are just a hurricane, and a hurricane's not a compelling story. That's all it is, right? And so you know, this is my problem. Like Zombie Monkey 7 said, what are all the factions that haven't been put into decent good, just to narrow down the list to the bottom? Yeah, just like they're all failing in some way, right? But like, I don't know where they all fall. I didn't want to get too granular. Like, what does the different levels of bad, you know?
We never mentioned Sylvaneth.
Again, I think they fall below the line, but they're not they're not decent, right. But they're not that bad. They're nowhere near the worst. No.
We have Sons of Behemoth.
Is doing a lot of work. A lot of work.
Sons of Behemoth.
Yeah.
Which
let me talk about Sylvaneth real quick, because I want to say this. Sylvaneth is a faction, boring and completely uninteresting. Alariel is a character, deeply interesting and fascinating. This is the problem that I had with them, because I thought about Sylvaneth a lot before this. And they almost made it onto my decent list on the strength of Alariel alone, who I think is like a legitimately interesting character, who's gone through a lot and a lot of changes, and she gets like lots of asides and talks and has like real motivations and character journeys and stuff like that. Yeah. I think she's super cool and compelling. It's just everybody else in Sylvaneth is like completely milquetoast and doesn't.
You know,
they aren't interesting.
There is another army that's been so unimpactful we've just forgotten about them.
Like Beast of Chaos, really who I haven't mentioned yet. Is that who you're going to talk about?
No, it's even worse than that. I mean, okay. Beast of Chaos is bad, but it's even worse than that.
Sure.
Bone Splitters.
Yeah, that's not real. It's not a real army. But sure.
No, it is. It is. Like, it's right here. If Ironjawz is
sure, right,
then Bone Splitters are even worse. They don't even have a real name character other than the Prophet.
Yeah. I mean, sure.
We at least have Gordrak, right, in Ironjawz, but like naked stick wielding orcs, they don't have a presence in there. Like, they are truly the bottom. Like, if there is the bottom, newsflash, it is them. I think even worse than Nighthaunt. to be very clear.
Yeah, I don't know. That's fair. I mean, like, boy, but that just feels like I'm really kicking a man when he's down right there. You know, I mean, like, sure, I guess it's barely a faction. It was clearly an afterthought in the book itself, so I can't expect them to do anything with them in the lore. Like, they're gone. They're obviously gone. Come the next edition, they cease existing, right?
Hey, we got head Kraka's Mad Mob. Like we got new models, buddy. You can get them online for $25 right now.
Yeah. I agree. Somebody said a faction so bad it's not even actually a candidate for worst. It just doesn't even appear in this list. Like that's what Bone Splitters is. We're talking about real factions here, Tom.
Exactly. I rest my case.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are going back to the old world. Like they don't have a place in AOS anymore. So like they're just written out. So they can't be the worst because they just don't exist. Error 404. Lore not found. Right? Yeah, I mean, to me it would be I think you make really compelling points on Night Haunt. I think it'd have to be between those two to me. Like Night Haunt and Iron Jaws. Somebody asked about Suns. I do think Suns are like tremendously boring and uninteresting, but at least but I don't know, but they're not down at the bottom at the worst because they have like tried to do some interesting things with them. They tried to do some fun fairy tale esque reimaginations with them. They do keep showing up in stories in some way or another and have some interesting, compelling things happening. It's super minimal, okay? But like they've got a little bit of something, so they're probably a low 2 is what it comes down to. Bad, failing, but not the worst. That's what it comes down to for Suns. They could do so much more. Okay.
Okay, those are the worst.
Yeah. Right.
I mean we're pretty clear on the best, right?
Yeah. Who's the best? Who's the best?
It's FEC. Show me one faction. I dare you. Show me one faction on that slide that's better than FEC.
Okay. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. Oops. Sorry, I went back too far. There we go. Okay. I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment. Because to me, this competition comes down to 3 factions for who's the best.
Okay.
FEC, Seraphon, and Cities. Okay. All 3 have very compelling overarching narratives. All 3 have characters. All 3 have a presence in the world. Right? They easily meet all the criteria.
Yep.
So we're not based on that, no.
Right.
My issue with FEC is its overarching story is doing all the heavy lifting. Still. Okay? We're starting finally to get some interesting stories out of the individual movements of the guy, like with Jarian and stuff like that, right? We're starting. But it's still pretty minimal. Okay? Whereas with Cities, and even with Seraphon, we have years of lots of really cool stories and interactions and lore of what these people have been doing and things like that. Tom, Cities have risen and fallen. Cities have tremendous characters that show up in like a myriad number of things. Callus and Toll at all. Okay? Cities are your viewing portal into the realms and their individual personality. Deeper though, Seraphon have a spaceship battle in one of the books. Just gonna put that on offer. Okay. Like, my issue with the FEC is they've grown a lot in the past 6 months. I'm still not sure it's enough. Like, if we were waiting solely on vibes, which is what you're saying, then yeah, probably. Like, if it was just vibes alone of like who's just kind of the coolest concept, it'd be FEC, because that concept is just fire, right?
And it's the remnants of Bretonia. Bretonia's getting new models, Vince.
Okay, sure. I mean, whatever. Like, as a pure distilled concept, it is very good. I'm not arguing that. But I just don't think enough, ironically, meat is on that bone to
I
give it the
mean,
best.
my problem is that cities are too big and too amorphous. That's the problem. Is that you literally have 13 sub factions that have all been lumped under a single heading,
Sure.
and it's meaningless because it is as big as it is.
It's still ultimately the grand story of a lot of humans trying to survive in an insane world. That's ultimately the story of all the cities. It's just different manifestations, different personalities. They're doing what I wanted to be done with the Stormcast. Right? What I wanted done with Stormcast was show me the different manifestations of a people literally at war for their existence. Okay? And have that come out through the characters. Cities give us that. They not the eternally at war. They give us the manifestation of different cultures, peoples, etc., put under conditions of extreme hostility where they shouldn't survive, right? Where the deck is stacked against them. They're not always at war. Some of these cities actually have extended periods of peace, right? But the deck is still stacked against them because life is hard and they're not supermen, right? And you see all the different manifestations of that as it comes through in the different cities. Some are noble and try to like better themselves and reach for glory and so on and so forth. A Hammerhall kind of attitude, right? Some become grimy and gritty and give in to like the grift, Misthaven or whatever, right? Where they're like that kind of thing. Some turn to their other allies and turn what would be enemies into friends, right? In the Sylvaneth Alliance city, okay, right? The Living City, and so on, right? And so to me, that's actually a strength, not a weakness. We get to see the permutations of what this world does to the people who live within it, and I think that's actually super compelling. I think my vote's got to be cities, but I mean, like, I think I would even pick Seraphon over FEC.
I don't know,
because that story is also equally wild, and they've done a lot.
I see nothing. Like,
and if we're gonna write in our own fan fiction, then I get to count. If you get to count dumb Chaos Elf crap, then I'm counting Battletoad Gothic. Let me just say that right now. At least my thing actually happened. Okay.
I mean, maybe it was just imagined in a space frog's mind. Like, I don't know that it's real. I don't know that that's not a real army. Like, that's fine. You can feel that way, but that's not a thing. I mean, again, I think but the same could be said as the delusion of the of a king, right?
Sure.
It may not be a real thing.
But I think it has to come down to one of those three. Like, I think from beyond that point, we could go back and forth and really have a lot of discussions about them. But I think it's one of those three. I think those are the top three, easily. Now we're just over who gets the gold, silver, bronze, and it's like a photo finish for different.
No, what I would say is this, like, there, and I think, like, let me just acknowledge that Cody is right, that Doc could be in that conversation as well. Like, of those three, Doc could potentially be there.
The problem is the rest of the faction's too weak. It's all on Marathi. That's why it doesn't deserve to be in this conversation.
Yeah, that's fair. No, that's fair.
Marathi is amazing and super compelling, but that's one character. And, like, she's done a lot. Like, a lot. Way more than Alariel. That's why somebody asked, like, why does Sylvaneth not get that credit when you gave it to Doc and they have similar arcs? And I agree with that. I think it's because Marathi's simply way more impactful on the world and has been a way more compelling character.
Way more interesting.
Yeah.
I agree. But, hey, folks, we want to hear from you.
That's right.
Which one do you think is the best? Which is the most compelling? Put it down in the comments below.
There you go. That's right. There you go. What did we miss? Where are we totally wrong? Give us some comments. Tell us all about it. Tom, thank you so much. This was a good discussion today. This went longer than I thought it would, but we just got into it and I couldn't stop because it's really compelling stuff. Like, there's actually a fun argument. Like, so I hope you all out there enjoyed the discussion. I'm glad my hotel internet was better this time than last time. We got some good hotel internet tonight. This has been nice and clean, real crisp. So way to go, New York hotel. I appreciate it. At any rate, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like if you haven't already. Subscribe. Do all those things that make all those dings. It helps other people find the show. Share it out there. All that kind of stuff. If you want to support the show, lots of ways you can do it. You can do the aforementioned liking, subscribing, sharing. That's all free and fun, and it'll make you cool. Your coolness factor will increase by at least 10% for doing any of those things. You can also pick up some merch down below. We've got all sorts of great merch if you want to join Team Tom or Team Tyler or anything like that. Or even my wife and our wonderful dogs with the Death Hounds on there, the Canines of Chaos. But you can also, of course, support us on Patreon, where we're really hobby focused and taking your next step on your journey. Or you can pick up a book that Uncle Adam and I make. Our newest zine is also linked down there, so you can find any of our previous books. All those things are down there. We really appreciate it. But thank you so much for watching. Next week will be the FEC review. Tom will not be participating because his opinion doesn't matter. No, I mean, like, that's not true. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're very much looking forward to it. 2+ Tough Doug is going to be here. It's going to be a great show. Look forward to that next week. I'll be back at home. As always, thank you so much for watching this, and we'll see you next Wednesday. I can't end it.